Max sat in the back seat of the car. He looked out the window. Trees passed by, fields passed by. He did not smile. He did not speak. His mom turned and said, "Be nice to Grandpa, okay?" Max nodded, but he didn't feel okay. They arrived at Grandpa's house. It was old. It was quiet. The windows were small. The air felt heavy. Grandpa opened the door. He wore a blue shirt and old brown pants. He had grey hair and a serious face. "Hello, Max," he said. "Hi," Max answered. That was all. They sat at the table. Grandpa drank tea. Max drank milk. No one talked. The clock ticked loudly. "You can help in the garden tomorrow," Grandpa said. Max looked down. "I don't like gardens," he whispered. After dinner, Max walked outside. The sun was going down. The trees looked tall and strange. There was no internet, no TV, just bugs, birds, and the sound of the wind. He missed his room. He missed his games. He missed his friends. That night, Max lay in bed. The room was dark. The bed was hard. He heard the frogs outside. He closed his eyes. He tried not to cry. Max feels far from home. His heart is closed. But sometimes a cold start can lead to a warm end. The next morning, Max woke up early. The sun was bright. The air smelled like grass. He walked to the kitchen. Grandpa was not there. Max looked out the window. Grandpa was in the garden. He wore gloves and a big hat. He was watering the plants. Max watched him for a while. Then he opened the door and walked outside. He didn't say anything. Grandpa looked up. "Good morning," he said. Max gave a small nod. There was a green hose on the ground. Water was running. Max picked it up. "I'll help," he said. Grandpa smiled just a little. "Thank you," he said. They watered the plants together. The ground felt soft. The flowers were yellow and red. A butterfly landed on Max's hand. He laughed. Grandpa looked over and laughed too. Just a little. But it was a start. After that, they sat on a bench. They didn't talk much. The birds sang in the trees. Later, Grandpa made lunch. They ate noodles with eggs and carrots. Max said, "It tastes good." Grandpa nodded. "You eat well," he said. Max smiled a little. That afternoon, they played a card game. Max didn't know the rules. Grandpa showed him. He was patient. Max laughed when he won a round. Grandpa smiled again. The room felt a little warmer. That night, Max wrote in his notebook, "Today was better. I think Grandpa is not so bad." A few days later, the sky turned grey. The wind blew hard. The air felt heavy again. Max stayed inside. He walked around the house. He saw a small wooden box on a shelf. Inside the box, there was an old radio. It was dusty. Max turned the dial. Nothing happened. He pressed a button. It made a loud crack. Then snap. Something broke. Max froze. At that moment, Grandpa walked in. His eyes went wide. "What are you doing?" he shouted. I just wanted to see," Max said. Grandpa looked at the broken radio. His face turned red. "That radio is not a toy!" he shouted louder. Max's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," he yelled. Then he ran out the door. The wind pushed at him. Rain began to fall. Max ran to the big tree behind the garden. He sat under it, hugging his knees. "I hate this place," he whispered. "No one understands me." But after a while he heard soft footsteps. It was Grandpa. He held an umbrella over Max's head. "Come inside," he said. But Max didn't move. Grandpa sat down beside him. He was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke. "That radio was from your father." Max looked at him. "He gave it to me when he was 16, Grandpa said. "We used to sit and listen to music together. Every night." Max blinked. "You never talk about Dad," he said. "I know," Grandpa said. His voice was low. "When he died, I didn't know what to say." The wind slowed. The rain became soft. "I miss him," Max said. Me too, Grandpa said. They sat under the tree, just two quiet hearts, together in the rain. The next morning, Max woke up early. He looked at the rain on the window. He remembered the radio. He remembered Grandpa's voice. I want to fix it, Max said to himself. He got dressed quickly. He took the broken radio from the shelf. He put it in his backpack. He walked to the village shop. The streets were wet. His shoes got muddy. At the shop, an old man sat behind the counter. Can you fix this? Max asked. The man opened the radio. It's old, he said, but I'll try. Max waited on a wooden bench. He looked at the clock. 1 hour, 2 hours. Finally, the man came back. It works now, he said. Max smiled. Thank you. He gave the man some coins from his pocket. It was all the money he had. He didn't mind. Back at home, Grandpa was in the garden. Max walked up to him. Here, Max said. He held out the radio. Grandpa looked at it. His hands touched it slowly. Then he looked at Max. You fixed it? He asked. Max nodded. I wanted to make it right. Grandpa's eyes became wet. He didn't speak. He just pulled Max into a hug. They sat on the porch that night. The stars were out. The radio played soft music. Your dad loved this song, Grandpa said. Max leaned on Grandpa's shoulder. I think I would have liked him, Max said. Grandpa smiled. He would have loved you. Summer went by quickly. The trees turned greener. The air smelled sweet. Max and Grandpa had new habits now. They drank tea together. They listened to music every night. They even laughed, sometimes a lot. Max wrote letters to his mom. He wrote about flowers, bugs, and the broken radio. He wrote, Grandpa is quiet, but he cares in his own way. On the last day, Max packed his bag. He looked around the small room. It didn't feel strange anymore. It felt like a little home. Grandpa stood by the door. He held something in his hand. It was an old photo. This is your dad when he was your age, Grandpa said. Max took the photo gently. His dad smiled at the camera. He looked full of life. Take it, Grandpa said. Remember where you come from. Max didn't speak. He just hugged Grandpa tight. It was the first hug they ever shared. I'll come back next summer, Max said. I'll be waiting, Grandpa answered. The car drove down the road. Max looked out the window. Trees passed by. Fields passed by. But this time his heart felt full.